In 2007, a 3-year-old girl named Madeleine McCann vanished from her family's holiday apartment in Portugal. The man now suspected of abducting and murdering her is currently serving a prison sentence for rape, but he may be released within months. If that happens, the investigation into Madeleine's disappearance could effectively collapse. Without a fresh conviction, he could simply vanish.
A new conviction could keep him behind bars.
He could just disappear.
Part 1. The Night Madeleine Disappeared. Praia da Luz, Portugal, May 3rd, 2007. A peaceful afternoon, calm sea, quiet streets, families strolling after dinner, children laughing on the sand. No signs, no warnings, no clue that a tragedy was about to unfold. At the Ocean Club Resort, British couple Jerry and Kate McCann were enjoying their holiday with their 3 children, twins Sean and Amelie, and their eldest daughter, 3-year-old Madeleine Beth McCann. Madeleine was an energetic little girl with blonde hair, bright eyes, and a lively personality that charmed everyone she met. That evening, as usual, Jerry and Kate joined their friends for dinner at the resort's tapas restaurant. They chose a table near the pool, just 50 meters away from their apartment. The children were left asleep in the room. The rear patio door was left slightly ajar for easier checks. The group took turns checking on the kids every 15 to 30 minutes. Jerry was the first to check around 9:05 p.m. Everything was normal. A friend, Matthew, followed around 9:30, but only glanced in briefly and didn't enter the room. At 10 p.m., Kate stood up and walked quickly back to the apartment. As she gently pushed open the patio door and stepped inside, a chill ran down her spine. The bedroom window was wide open. The curtains were billowing in the breeze. Madeleine's bed was empty. "She's gone!" Kate screamed in horror. "They've taken her!" The entire resort was jolted awake by Kate McCann's scream. At first, no one believed anything serious had happened. Maybe the child had hidden under the covers. Maybe she had wandered off somewhere in the complex. But after 30 minutes of searching with flashlights and calling Madeleine's name, panic truly set in. Jerry McCann ran to every room, every bush around the resort. No trace, no sound, no sign of hope. Local police, GNR, arrived around 10:40 p.m., but they didn't bring forensic experts. They didn't seal the apartment. They didn't collect key evidence like bed sheets, toys, or inspect the opened window. Due to inexperience, the local investigators failed to preserve the initial crime scene. Instead of immediately treating it as a kidnapping, they leaned toward a theory of spontaneous disappearance, a fateful misjudgment. The next morning, Madeleine's photo flooded newspapers across the UK and Portugal. A blonde girl, bright eyes, beaming smile, the perfect image of a missing innocent child. The case instantly drew global attention. Praia da Luz, once a quiet coastal village, now held secrets darker than anyone had imagined. A chilling question once asked by an investigator still echoes. If someone stood outside apartment 5A, staring at the patio door in the dark, would anyone have noticed? The answer, no one. Behind the apartment where Madeleine slept, there were no lights, no security cameras, no guards. A person could stand motionless in the darkness, silently observing every movement inside the room, completely undetected. And if you can observe, you can plan. The window in Madeleine's room, believed to be either the entry or exit point, remains one of the most controversial details in the case. Jerry McCann claimed the window was closed, but when Kate came to check at 10 p.m., it was wide open, with curtains flapping. Did the intruder come through the window? or enter through the already open patio door, and simply open the window to mislead investigators. In August 2007, 2 British sniffer dogs were brought in, one trained to detect blood, the other trained to detect cadaver scent. Both reacted at several spots inside apartment 5A, and even inside the rental car used by the McCanns, 25 days after Madeleine's disappearance. However, cadaver dogs alone are not conclusive in court. They suggest possibilities, not facts. But Portuguese police relied heavily on those signals and turned their investigation toward the parents. Meanwhile, crucial evidence was being ignored. Independent reports showed a clear spike in nighttime break-ins around Praia da Luz between 2005 and 2007. Locals and tourists reported strangers lurking around holiday apartments. Some cases shared eerie similarities: tampered windows, children startled by a stranger, but not enough evidence to prosecute. If all those reports had been collected and studied carefully, they might have pointed police in an entirely different direction. One of the key witnesses was Jane Tanner, a friend of the McCanns. She reported seeing a man carrying a small blonde girl in light-colored pajamas hurrying across the street near apartment 5A, just minutes after Jerry's check. The way he carried the child, his tense movements, it didn't look like a father putting a child to bed. Yet this sighting was not treated seriously at the time. It would take years until the German investigation reopened for her account to be re-examined as a vital piece of the puzzle. No CCTV footage, no license plate, no suspicious phone pings at the right moment. This was no ordinary abduction. It was the work of someone who knew how to vanish, erase traces, and perhaps had done this before. One forgotten detail: the patio door wasn't locked. While many early theories focused on the bedroom window, a darker possibility was ignored: that the intruder had walked in calmly through the main door, which was left open for convenience. All it would take was someone observant, someone who watched the McCann group from afar for just a few evenings, learning their routines, dinner times, child checks, who left the table, and when. That suggests planning, surveillance, a methodical predator. Another rarely mentioned fact: Ocean Club had no full security camera coverage, no footage of the back exit, no visual evidence from that night. And without surveillance, a cautious predator could vanish, without a trace. It raises a chilling theory. What if Madeleine's abduction was the act of a repeat offender? Someone with a known pattern of targeting children, with experience in staying hidden, someone who lived nearby, or returned often. It would take nearly a decade for one name to surface, a name that made all the disconnected pieces suddenly make terrifying sense: Christian Brueckner. What many never realized is that in the early years, all eyes were on Kate and Jerry McCann, the parents. That delay may have given the real perpetrator enough time to disappear forever. Crimes against children don't just devastate families, they strike fear into society. These are not just violations of law, they are violations of humanity itself. Such predators, if not caught, will continue. They don't stop. They learn to hide better, and they count on the world to forget. But Madeleine McCann cannot be forgotten. She deserves to be found. She deserves justice. And we, the rest of us, have a duty not to let this case fade away. If you were in Algarve in 2007, near Praia da Luz, if you saw or heard anything unusual, even the smallest detail, speak up. Share this story, say her name, keep the pursuit of justice alive. Because when the truth is buried, predators continue to operate in the dark. But this case wasn't over, because years later, in an abandoned industrial site in Germany, a dog began to bark and dig. And what it uncovered would open an entirely new chapter in the Madeleine McCann case. Continue to Part 2/8, Inside the Lair of Christian B. Part 2, Inside the Lair of Christian B. Hidden among the ruins of an abandoned industrial lot in Braunschweig, Germany, police dogs sniffed, barked, and began to dig. It was 2020, 13 years after Madeleine McCann's disappearance. What they unearthed wasn't a body, but it was disturbing. A cellar, secret, buried, reinforced with concrete and covered with debris. Inside, torn children's swimsuits, a stash of USB drives, over 8,000 images and videos, many too graphic to describe, some clearly involving minors. And these items belonged to one man, Christian Brueckner, a convicted pedophile, a serial offender, a drifter with a long, dark trail behind him. But who was he, and how did he become the prime suspect in the Madeleine McCann case? Born in Germany in 1976, Brueckner spent much of his youth in foster care. As a teen, he spiraled into petty crime, and then something far worse, child abuse. His first conviction for sexually abusing a child came when he was just 19. Over the next 2 decades, he would move across borders, using multiple identities, slipping through legal cracks like a ghost. In the early 2000s, he settled in the Algarve region of Portugal, not far from the Ocean Club Resort in Praia da Luz. He worked odd jobs, fixed roofs, traded used cars, but he also dealt drugs and committed burglaries. And chillingly, he lived in a battered VW camper van, often parked just a few hundred meters from apartment 5A. Police now believe he had been in the area for years, watching, waiting. Phone records later revealed his mobile phone was active near the Ocean Club on the very night Madeleine disappeared, May 3, 2007. At precisely 7:32 p.m., he received a 30-minute call from a Portuguese number. Then, silence. He vanished into the night. Years passed, leads dried up. But in 2017, a tip from a private investigator in Germany rekindled interest in Brueckner. Investigators began piecing together his past. What emerged was the profile of a man with a pattern of targeting young girls, often under the radar, often undetected. Investigators began piecing together his past. What emerged was the profile of a man with a pattern of targeting young girls, often under the radar, often undetected. Investigators began piecing together his past. What emerged was the profile of a man with a pattern of targeting young girls, often under the radar, often undetected. Investigators began piecing together his past. What emerged was the profile of a man with a pattern of targeting young girls, often under the radar, often undetected. Investigators began piecing together his past. What emerged was the profile of a man with a pattern of targeting young girls, often under the radar, often undetected. Investigators began piecing together his past. What emerged was the profile of a man with a pattern of targeting young girls, often under the radar, often undetected. Investigators began piecing together his past. What emerged was the profile of a man with a pattern of targeting young girls, often under the radar, often undetected. Horrifying light. The lair, the basement, the child swimsuits, the images, the location, the van, the proximity. Each piece on its own might seem circumstantial, but together they painted a chilling portrait. Had Brueckner been stalking Madeleine and her family in the days before she vanished? German prosecutors believe so. They now classify it as a homicide case, and Brueckner is officially the prime suspect. But to this day, he denies any involvement. He refuses to speak to investigators. His lawyer insists he had nothing to do with Madeleine's disappearance. But the evidence, while not yet conclusive, continues to build. A friend of Brueckner's recalls him showing videos of children being abused. Another says he once bragged that Madeleine is gone and she's never coming back. Was that a cruel joke? Or a confession? The house where police found the cellar of horrors had once belonged to Brueckner. He had lived there, alone. No neighbors, no visitors, just a man with secrets and a past that kept catching up with him. The VW camper van, seen near the Ocean Club, was lateness warnings about how predators exploit blind spots and how communities can be lulled into false security. The fight against crimes targeting children must never be passive. It must be loud, relentless, and united, because the silence is where these monsters hide. If you have any information about Christian Brueckner, his movements in Portugal in 2007, or anything that could help investigators, report it now. Share this video, spread her name. Keep Madeleine's case alive, because someone, somewhere, still knows the truth. Continue to part 3/8, the phone ping and the Jaguar. Part 3, the phone ping and the Jaguar. The night Madeleine McCann vanished. May 3rd, 2007, was calm on the surface, but beneath that calm, something stirred. At 7:32 p.m., a mobile phone connected to a cell tower just a few hundred meters from the Ocean Club resort. It wasn't random. It wasn't noise. It belonged to Christian Brueckner. The ping placed him within reach of apartment 5A, at the exact window of time when Madeleine was getting ready for bed. That single piece of data would later become the linchpin in the case against him. But it was more than a ping. It was a signal, a footprint, a moment frozen in digital time, one he couldn't erase. At that moment, he received a 30-minute call from a Portuguese number. Authorities later traced the number to a known associate of Brueckner, a man also connected to petty crime and narcotics. But what were they discussing? Why call then, and why there? The timing was suspicious, the location damning. Investigators now believe Brueckner may have been watching apartment 5A, possibly finalizing a plan. The phone ping wasn't just a coincidence, it was a proximity alert. But that's not all. In the months leading up to Madeleine's disappearance, Brueckner had been seen driving a distinctively old, beat-up Jaguar XJR6, a model from the 90s, scratched paint, German plates. Not the kind of vehicle that blends in among tourists. Yet, strangely, just days after Madeleine vanished, he registered the Jaguar in someone else's name, despite continuing to drive it. Was this a tactic to throw off investigators? Possibly, because this wasn't the only vehicle Brueckner was using. At the time, he also owned a white and yellow Volkswagen T3 camper van, the same van he allegedly used to stake out beach resorts and holiday complexes. One witness recalled seeing that van near Praia da Luz on multiple occasions, parked for hours facing the Ocean Club, its curtains drawn. Why? Because it was a vantage point, a place where one could watch, learn, and plan, unseen. The combination of the Jaguar, the VW van, and the cell tower ping paints a chilling picture. A man lurking, a man watching, a man preparing. German prosecutors have since confirmed that Brueckner's phone data places him at or near the scene, and he had no legitimate reason to be there. When confronted with this evidence, Brueckner gave no explanation. He remained silent, and silence, when paired with such digital precision, speaks volumes. But here's where the story takes a darker turn. After Madeleine's disappearance, Brueckner left Portugal suddenly. He abandoned his rental property. He sold off items. He fled. Authorities now know he left behind a storage unit in Germany, filled with hundreds of child exploitation images and videos, some dating back years, some possibly taken in Portugal. Among them were pictures of young girls with blonde hair and green eyes. Was Madeleine among them? So far, no confirmed images of her have been recovered. But the timing and the nature of the content sent shockwaves through investigators. What kind of man keeps trophies like these? What kind of mind stores that darkness? There's more. A former friend of Brueckner recalled a chilling comment. Some kids are just meant to disappear. It was said over drinks, laughed off. But now it sounds less like banter and more like confession. Another former roommate spoke of a hidden compartment in Brueckner's van, large enough for a child. It was padded, reinforced, and locked from the outside. Why would someone build something like that? Unless they plan to use it. All signs point to preparation, intent, obsession. Yet for years, no one connected the dots. Portugal closed its investigation in 2008. The trail went cold. The McCanns were left in limbo, and Brueckner continued his life, slipping between countries, changing names, erasing traces. But the phone ping never disappeared. Digital truth doesn't lie, it doesn't forget. In an age where criminals hide in shadows, the cell tower was the lighthouse, and Christian Brueckner was caught in its beam. And still, he denies everything. He calls the evidence fabricated. He accuses the police of witch hunting. But there is no conspiracy here, only data, location, timing, pattern. A child vanished, and a predator's phone was at the scene. That isn't coincidence, that's cause. Crimes against children are never isolated events. They are the product of deep, sustained evil, and the systems that failed to stop it. Christian Brueckner is the symptom. The sickness is bigger, but we can fight it. If you were in Portugal in 2007, if you saw that camper van, that Jaguar, that man, speak now. Even the smallest detail could matter. Share Madeleine's story, speak her name, keep the pressure on. We owe it to her. We owe it to every child still missing. Because justice delayed is still justice if we fight for it. Continue to Part 4/8, The Forgotten Reports and Missed Witnesses. Part 4, The Forgotten Reports and Missed Witnesses. For years, the focus remained on Apartment 5A, on Jerry, on Kate, on the patio door left ajar. The world scrutinized the McCanns, their dinner schedule, their body language, their grief. But while eyes were turned inward, the real danger remained outside. There were witnesses, there were reports, but they were ignored. Let's go back to the spring of 2007, not just to May 3rd, but to the weeks before. Residents of Praia da Luz, locals, expats, tourists, began reporting strange incidents. Men loitering around vacation homes, unfamiliar vans parked facing children's play areas, knocks at doors late at night, followed by silence. One British couple reported a break-in. Nothing was stolen, but their young daughter said she woke up to a man in the room, watching her. No fingerprints, no forced entry, and no follow-up by police. In fact, between 2005 and 2007, there were over a dozen incidents reported in the Algarve region, all involving children, all near resorts, and all dismissed as isolated. They weren't, they were trial runs. And someone was studying. German investigators believe that Christian Brueckner may have been involved in more than one of these incidents. In some cases, descriptions of the suspect match his height, build, and voice. But because local authorities didn't consolidate reports across regions, the pattern was lost. The same man, the same van, the same fear. One former Ocean Club employee recalled seeing a man with binoculars watching children from a rooftop weeks before Madeleine vanished. She told her manager, "Nothing happened." Another local woman recalled a man asking detailed questions about apartment layouts and how often parents checked on kids at night. She reported it. Nothing happened. Why were these early warnings ignored? Was it negligence, inexperience, or something deeper? A reluctance to believe that something sinister could be happening in a place sold as paradise. By the time authorities realized the magnitude of what they missed, the trail had already gone cold, and the witnesses had vanished. Part 5/8, Hidden Files and Forgotten Secrets, May 2016. An abandoned factory in Germany is raided by police. Beneath a rotting wooden plank, they uncover a suitcase, tightly sealed in plastic. Inside, 6 USB drives, 2 memory cards, an external hard drive, and hundreds of photos, videos, and handwritten documents. But what sent chills down investigators' spines was the content. They found child abuse material, encrypted letters, and disturbing handwritten stories, describing the abduction and imprisonment of children. This wasn't a random collection of depravity. It was a personal archive, fantasies recorded in writing, accompanied by real-world items, children's swimsuits, masks, toy guns, and manipulated photographs. Christian B. wasn't just thinking about crimes, he was planning them and documenting every step. One file in particular grabbed investigators' attention: a printed satellite map marked with hand-drawn circles across the Algarve region in Portugal. Among them, the Ocean Club, where Madeleine disappeared. The nearby church, where cadaver dogs lost the trail. A parking lot mentioned by a key witness, and most notably, the Arade Dam. Handwritten notes on the map included cryptic markings: X, quantity, date, and words like silence, no witnesses, and safe vehicle. Police believe this may have been a planning document for potential crimes, or even a record of an event that had already occurred. If that's the case, Christian wasn't just observing the area, he had scouted it. A form of geographic profiling, often seen in premeditated child abductions. Inside one photo folder was a deeply unsettling image. A young blonde girl, roughly Madeleine's age, stands in a pine forest, her eyes wide in shock at the camera flash. The photo is grainy, but haunting. Timestamp mid-2007, location unknown, and the XIF data had been completely wiped. Why was it erased? Why was it hidden? And most crucially, who is this girl? Another image shows Christian wearing a mask, standing in front of his camper van, dated June 2007, just 1 month after Madeleine vanished. These images were never released publicly, but they exist in confidential German police files. The question is, if the evidence is this compelling, why hasn't there been an arrest? Under German law, convicting someone in a case like Madeleine's requires proof beyond reasonable doubt. That means, even with 99 puzzle pieces, if one is missing, the whole picture isn't enough for a conviction. That's why the contents of the suitcase were kept hidden for so long. Another section of the devices included disturbing Skype chats between Christian B. and others. In them, he fantasizes about bringing a young girl into the camper, using sedatives, and ensuring total silence. Some exchanges were so graphic, even his conversation partners backed away, horrified. Police see this as psychological evidence, showing intent to commit crimes, even if no specific act can yet be proven. But when combined with the maps, photos, and physical objects, Christian B.'s profile is no longer speculative. It's the profile of a predator who has already acted, condemning the darkness. In a civilized society, there is no place for those who hide in the shadows, preying on innocence and stealing childhoods. The forgotten files in that suitcase are more than digital data. They are silenced voices, buried memories, unnamed pain, and they cannot remain buried any longer. If you were a former neighbor, an acquaintance, or have any information about where Christian lived, camped, or visited, come forward. Even a small memory, a glimpse of his camper van, could be the missing piece we desperately need. Share this video, spread the word, and keep Madeleine's name alive in public consciousness. Up next, Part 6, The Survivors' Testimonies. Because next, we'll hear the chilling words of the ones who survived. Women who once believed they would die, but lived to testify. Part 6/8, The Survivors' Testimonies, October 2024. A packed courtroom in Braunschweig, Germany. A woman steps up to testify. Her name is Hazel Bean, a survivor of an assault that happened 20 years ago. At the time, she was a tour guide, living in a small hotel in the Algarve. That night, she woke up in the middle of a nightmare. A masked man stood beside her bed, holding a knife, calling her name. He tied her hands with a belt, set up a camera, and carried out his brutal act. But what she remembers most wasn't the pain. It was that voice and those blue eyes. The very things she still believes belonged to Christian B. Hazel wasn't the only one. Another victim, just 5 years old, was attacked by Christian in a small garden in 2013, only a few kilometers from Praia da Luz. The girl survived and described the van in detail, the smell inside, and a tattoo on the attacker's right leg. In 2018, a forensic report confirmed Christian B. had a scar on his right thigh, matching the child's statement. But during Hazel's trial, this evidence was not presented. Justice slipped away. Again. These testimonies aren't just memories. They are living proof of a systematic pattern of abuse. More witnesses came forward, people who had lived with Christian, stolen with him, or crossed paths at festivals across Europe. One former friend recalled a chilling moment. At a music festival in Spain in 2008, someone mentioned Madeleine. Christian leaned in and whispered, "That little girl, she didn't scream. Didn't scream." The words froze his friend in place. That very night, Christian left the festival, driving off into the darkness, as if he'd just let slip a confession. Such stories can't stand alone in court, but they form a behavioral pattern. A predator, always fleeing, always hiding from consequences, but never escaping the memories of those who survived. There's a recurring pattern among the victims. Christian was always prepared. He wore masks, carried restraints, and knew his target's routines. He recorded audio, he filmed, he carried a weapon. He wasn't impulsive. He was a methodical predator. Some survivors even described a chemical smell, possibly ether, used to render them unconscious. Each case, each story, is a puzzle piece. And when we put them together, the questions become impossible to ignore. How many others haven't spoken? How many children stepped into Christian B's camper van and never came back? We must listen to survivors, not just because they lived, but because they carry truths the world has yet to hear. Segment 5/5, Condemning the Crime. Silence is complicity. Ignoring these voices is enabling the crime. These women, once overlooked, once doubted, stood up and testified. They are living witnesses to a truth society once chose to ignore. If you were harmed by Christian B, or know someone who suspected him, speak out. Share your story. Seek justice, not just for Madeleine, but for all who were never protected. Up next, Part 7/8. The case that could break him. Where all the evidence converges and Christian B's fate hangs in the balance. Part 7/8. The case that could break him. January 2024, Braunschweig Court, Germany. Christian Brueckner appears in court facing 5 serious charges, 3 involving adult victims, 2 involving minors. While not directly linked to the Madeleine case, this was a strategic move by lead prosecutor Hans Christian Wolters. They needed a new conviction to keep Christian behind bars and buy time for the ongoing investigation. Because if released in September, he could vanish once again, just as he has many times before. This wasn't just a courtroom battle, it was a test. Could justice finally catch up to him? Witnesses came forward, one after another. One woman, who had remained anonymous for years, stood before the court to share her account of an attack back in 2004 in the Algarve. She described a masked man, blue eyes, and a voice she would never forget. Every detail matched previous reports. But, due to the lack of direct identification, the court ruled not guilty. Christian was cleared of all 5 charges, despite a mounting pattern and consistent testimonies. A loophole in the law had opened wide, and the prosecution knew this might be their final chance. The case of Madeleine McCann. Time is running out. But here's what they have. GPS data from Christian's vehicle showing repeated stops at the Arade Dam, a location of significant interest. Photographs of Christian at that very spot, in suspicious and disturbing poses. A hidden USB drive, discovered inside a sealed container buried beneath an abandoned site. Graphic fictional writings, penned by Christian, describing scenarios involving a young blonde girl, roughly 4 years old. Physical markings matching statements from past victims. Together, they form a deeply unsettling picture, but perhaps the most revealing evidence was his intent. In a series of private messages, Christian spoke to another individual, outlining a disturbing plan involving a young girl, isolation, and control. When the other person suggested a more voluntary approach, Christian rejected it outright. His reply, no. Fear is necessary, control is everything. This wasn't just fantasy, it was a plan, and possibly a pattern. This isn't just the story of one man, it's about the silence, the delays, the gaps in justice that allowed him to stay hidden. When evidence is brushed aside, when brave testimonies aren't followed through, We're not just failing justice, we're failing the victims. Justice for Madeleine can't wait another year, month, or day. If you've seen anything, even something small like a silver jaguar, or if you've ever encountered Christian, reach out to German authorities, and most importantly, share this story so no one else becomes the next forgotten name. Stay with us for part 8 of 8, the final countdown, where the future of this case may finally be decided. Part 8/8, the final countdown. September 2025, a day when all of Europe holds its breath. If no new charges are filed, Christian Brueckner will be set free. After 7 years in custody, the prime suspect in the Madeleine McCann case could disappear once again. And this time, no one will know where he's headed, what name he's using, or who his next target might be. German investigators call it 0 hour, a point of no return. Because if charges aren't filed before then, every opportunity may vanish forever. But is there enough to indict? Yes, cell phone data placing Christian near the scene the night Madeleine vanished. Traffic cameras showing his Jaguar XJ6 leaving Praia da Luz the very next morning. The vehicle's registration later transferred to an ex-girlfriend, an obvious cover-up. GPS traces from the Arade Dam, a place Christian once called his private paradise. Disturbing material found on an 80-gigabyte hard drive, including images, restraints, and masks. A chilling statement overheard: that little girl didn't scream. And yet, one final hurdle remains. The law demands proof beyond reasonable doubt. In the final months, German investigators doubled their efforts, identifying other potential victims who may have encountered Christian in the Algarve during the same period. Re-interviewing witnesses from 2007 to verify timelines. Recovering deleted data from Christian's laptops and phones. Analyzing chemical traces from the Jaguar, never fully examined before. Consulting criminal psychologists to assess behavioral patterns. Then, in August 2025, they submitted a final dossier to court with one clear goal: to charge Christian B with the abduction and murder of Madeleine McCann. But those close to the case know the trial ahead will be a brutal legal battle. Christian's defense lawyer is a veteran of many high-profile wins. Their counter-arguments are sharp. No DNA of Madeleine has been found. GPS data, they claim, can be unreliable. Witness Helga has a criminal past. His credibility is questionable. The disturbing stories Christian wrote? Just fiction, they argue. So now the question is, will justice trust in innocence until proven guilty, or recognize the disturbing pattern repeated over 20 years? If justice cannot prevail despite overwhelming evidence, what hope remains for future victims? We must ask ourselves, whom does the system truly protect, the innocent or those with better lawyers? We cannot allow another child to fall into the hands of predators like Christian B because of hesitation or legal loopholes. If you know anything, no matter how small, about Christian Brueckner, his silver Jaguar, or any girl who disappeared in the Algarve, come forward. Send an anonymous tip. Share this video. You could help save a child's life. The search for truth in the Madeleine McCann case has lasted over 18 years, and now the clock is ticking. The final countdown begins.